Last summer, I embarked on this Quanzhang Road International Youth Ultra Gobi Challenge. 72 kilometers on foot to conquer a barren gobi. The sun scorched my skin, the sand filled my collar. Every step was heavy, yet resolute. I once believed that with enough perseverance and efforts, I could overcome any obstacle, conquer any hardship. The heavy metal was my complete understanding of man triumphing over nature. But when I truly stood by Taihu, gazing at waters plagued time and again by cyanobacteria blooms, witnessing the murky and the clear intertwined, for the first time, I truly understood there are problems that can never be solved by trying harder or persisting longer. The Gobi could be measured by footsteps, but the wounds of Taihu require a clearer mind and a humbler heart. The trouble of this Jiangnan gem compels me to pause and seek the heavier and the truer answers hidden beneath the rippling water. Taihu, a radiant pearl set upon the land of Jiangnan. For millenniums, its clear waters have nurtured life along its shores, sustained countless homes and given rise to the gentle cultural heritage of Jiangnan. But today, Taihu is no longer what it once was. Parts of its surface are tightly sealed by gloomy algae. The once unbroken clarity is gone. The water has lost its formal transparency and vitality, replaced by troubling murkiness and gloom. In memory, Taihu was so clear that you could see the bottom. A handful of its water tasted sweet and cool. Washing clothes, splashing in the water, fishing. These were the everyday rhythms etched into the bones of Jiangnan people. A homesickness flowing in their blood, the warmest imprint of the generation's childhood. The challenge in water quality never struck all at once. It crept in quietly, ripple by ripple, day after day. Every patch of algae, every streak of murkiness, every anomaly on the water's surface, all silently speak of the pressure and pain Taihu endures. This seemingly fragile, tiny algae, once it bloomed in favorable conditions, spread like a plague, becoming a chronic, stubborn ecological crisis for Taihu, shattering its original balance. I'm the director of this documentary. I came not merely to document the present state of a body of water, but to truly walk with Taihu, to touch it, to see its scars, to understand its suffering, and together with all who care for it, to search for the answer that will bring back its clarity. Those who have lived by Taihu for generations feel its changes most keenly. The fluctuating water quality, the frequent algae blooms, the once familiar lakeside life is gradually fading, quietly affecting daily routines, travel, and leisure, leaving hearts full of regret and concern. The full stench of algae blooms, the worsening water, they don't just damage the ecosystem. They silently seep into every aspect of coastal residents' lives. Food, clothing, housing, travel, disrupting the once peaceful rhythm of daily living. Once, Taihu was a natural fish larder, abundant with shrimp and fish. Its docks bustled every day, returning fishing boats laden with catches, a stream of merchants. That was the fisherman's most solid anchor, the most vibrant portrait of Taihu.
我们小时候的时候，那个太湖水很清澈的，我们喜欢在里面捕鱼啊、抓那个螃蟹啊，还有这个什么样的东西，太湖水产品什么样的都有的。后来经过一个时期之后，就是随着环境污染，然后各方面啦，太湖水啦有了一点变化，然后河里面的那种那个河蚌啊，那个小鱼啊这种都少了，后来就捕不到了。
天热了，湖边就边脏得很啊，风一吹全是腥臭味，窗户白天黑天都不敢开。现在自来水也要过滤好几遍才好用， 湖边乘凉聊天啊，热闹玩的人很少，心里好难受啊。
The ecological crisis of Taihu has never been the problem of one group alone. It touches the heart of every person, every enterprise along its shores. As a leading local enterprise in Suzhou, Eastern Shenhong has always placed the ecological protection of Taihu at the forefront, actively taking responsibility and exploring feasible paths for the coordinated progress of corporate development and ecological conservation.
太湖是我们共同的母亲湖，保护太湖是企业义不容辞的责任。我们始终严格遵守环保标准，在生产全流程严控污染物排放，持续投入专项资金升级环保处理设施，优化生产工艺，从源头减少污染，努力实现经济效益、社会效益与生态效益的共赢，为太湖治理贡献企业力量。
The smallest changes in the lake fall first upon the lives of the coastal residents. The deepest pain belongs to those who live with Taihu. Taihu bamboo weaving thrives by the lake and lives with the waters. As the river basin's ecology and environment change, high-quality aged bamboo along the shore has grown increasingly scarce.
我们以前小时候是出去要对水这边吃，都要尽快到河里边去弄一下就下来了。现在没有了。我们原来那个碧丝草这里边就是像这个我们比如说中午休息了弄个网去河里边去弄，有虾都有，旁边鱼还有蹦那下的，都比一早呜咕咕叫起来，这个好吃的不得了啊！现在这个看不到了，就是这个水质问题，肯定是跟以前不能比了。吃起来个味道，这个水菜饼就不一样。以前这个水菜饼很鲜，吃了很味道，现在不行了。
People's livelihoods, the inheritance of intangible cultural heritage, and cultural roots are all deeply tied to Taihu. Behind the current hardships, what lies at the real root of the problem? And how can we break free from this difficult situation? Dear Professor Pearl, as someone who has studied lakes globally, what's your first reaction when you hear about Taihu's situation?
Well, Taihu is a lake that it's the third largest lake in China. I think you know that already. And it changed in terms of its water quality and its, the algae in the lake. Since maybe the 1980s or so, 80s, early 90s. The lake used to be quite clear. It had a lot more attached plants on the bottom and not so much algae in the water. But then since the mid-80s and since the expansion of cities around Taihu, including Wuxi, Suzhou, and other even smaller towns, and also the increase in agricultural activities around the lake, including growing lots of things, corn, rice, but also fruit and tea. Those have all used fertilizers, and of course the fertilizer a lot of it ends up in the lake itself. So due to human activity, the lake has changed a lot since the 1980s, and it has changed in terms of the algae in the lake from more desirable algae like diatoms and algae that we like to have in the lake to the blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, so that now cyanobacteria dominate the algae in the lake for at least 9 months out of the year. They grow in very high amounts, particularly during the summertime when it's warm, and they produce toxic compounds that can affect fish, shellfish, the zooplankton that eat the algae, and also us, humans.
Are we sometimes solving the wrong problem, leaving out key factors? From your global experience, what key factors are we most likely to miss when managing lakes like Taihu?
I would say you need to look at all forms of these nutrients. In the case of Taihu, for example, organic sources of nitrogen and phosphorus can be really important too. And you know, the emphasis has always been on inorganic forms like nitrate and ammonium and phosphate. But organic nitrogen is really important as well, because in a lake as big as Taihu, when you put organic nitrogen in, eventually that organic nitrogen will be converted to inorganic nitrogen by microbes. So one thing we're often ignoring is the organic sources of nutrients that are coming in to lakes as well. And that's why we often mention, when we talk about nitrogen and phosphorus, we often talk about total nitrogen and total phosphorus. Not just only the inorganic forms, which are obvious, like fertilizers, for example, but also the organic forms. And the organic forms have to deal, a lot of them come from land use changes and the soils and decaying plant material and stuff like that. So that's a mistake we often make, is ignoring the organic sources of these nutrients as well. And I think we should put more effort into keeping nutrients from getting into the lake in the first place.
You've seen many management strategies. Well, what's a common blind spot or mistake you've observed when we might be repeating?
Well, you know, the emphasis has been on controlling phosphorus for quite a long time. Phosphorus was identified as a problem nutrient coming into the lake. But more recently, we have recognized that nitrogen is almost, if not as important as phosphorus. So what's happening now in lake management is that managers and the public are becoming more aware of the importance of nitrogen as well. And we need to control the input of nitrogen. And that's not so easy because, as you can imagine, we use nitrogen a lot in fertilizers, and there's a lot of nitrogen that's being produced that is washing into the lake, including excess fertilizers, atmospheric pollution, oxides of nitrogen that go into the air but then come down into the lake eventually. So even the air pollution can affect, how much nitrogen is coming in. So the big change that's occurred in managing lakes is that we now have to really worry about two nutrients, not just phosphorus alone, but also nitrogen.
For my generation of students, what's one realistic and hopeful action we can take? Could you please include some examples about your own career?
I think that understanding how to manage land better is key. And the interesting thing in China, 100 years ago in China, the farmers knew exactly what to do with their growing crops. They didn't buy fertilizers, they just used waste and recycled the waste on the land, so that the nutrients are getting recycled on the land before they could get into the lake. But in modern agriculture now, or modern, I put that in parentheses, in modern agriculture, even the Chinese don't bother recycling their waste very much anymore. They just buy bags of fertilizer and apply those on land. And I think going back to the old way of farming, where you use waste that is created, animal waste, for example, from raising pigs and chickens and stuff like that, and recycling that in the soil instead of applying more fertilizers to grow the crops. You grow the crops on the waste that you generate. We have the same problem in the US, and the same problem exists in Europe and other places. It's too cheap to go ahead and buy fertilizer and forget about, don't recycle waste. It's old-fashioned, but it's very effective.
As I filmed, visited, and thought along the way, I've come to realize more clearly, Taihu's problems and never only the superficial issue of algae blooms. We have taken far too much from Taihu for nourishment, yet failed to give back and protect it. Taihu has been waiting all along, waiting for us to find the right and sustainable way to protect it. Having come this far, I've come to understand completely. Restoring Taihu has never been just a simple environmental project. It protects the ordinary lives of coastal people, the cultural roots passed down through generations, and the unbreakable homesickness and attachment of Jiangnan. Taihu does not belong to any one person. It is our common home. Its ecological health affects the present and future of everyone along its shores, and the sustainable future of Jiangnan itself. To restore Taihu, we must first strictly control the sources of pollution, strictly control industrial, agricultural, and domestic sewage discharge, upgrade environmental treatment facilities comprehensively, build a round-the-clock water quality monitoring system, reduce the input of nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients at the source, and cut off the food supply of algae blooms. We must also use ecological methods to help Taihu slowly recover its self-purification capacity. Through ecological restoration, sediment dredging, planting aquatic vegetation, and constructing wetland systems, let Taihu regain its inherent power of self-cleansing and self-regulations. To protect Taihu's ecology, we must also reclaim a culture of reverence for nature. Let more young people approach Taihu, understand it, learn the traditional crafts, replant in people's hearts the belief of revering nature and protecting the lake. Let culture become the enduring guardians of ecology. The water of Taihu once nourished our food, clothing, housing, and travel, and gave birth to the gentle culture of Jiangnan. In the past, Taihu silently guarded the coastal living beings. Today, it is our turn, with responsibility, with action, with reverence, to guard this lake. You see, as long as we govern with heart, protect with persistence, Taihu will not fail us. Bit by bit, it is shedding its wounds, slowly returning to its former clarity and brightness, coming back to life. When I left the Gobi, I naively believed that the world could be measured by feet and conquered by my will. But after approaching Taihu, after reading its story, I finally understand there are things that must be measured by reverence, guarded by conscience, and sustained with endurance. The restoration of Taihu is about how we define true development, how we account for the price of ecology, and its complex game of interests. Who will speak for silent nature? The perfect balance may be hard to find. The model will eventually have its deviations. But my steps in searching for answers closer to the truth, in guarding the clarity of Taihu, will never stop.